When it comes to the Fallout series, there are many ways people can build their characters around what weapons they want to use. If you've been around the channel for a while now, then you know I'm more of a melee weapons enthusiast, partly because I find it more satisfying in using guns in Fallout 3 and New Vegas, and that I have such a jittery trigger finger that I'm more likely to paint an outline of someone with bullets than actually hit them. Regardless, I have found that most melee weapons in the 3D Fallout games have their uses at some point or another and aren't all entirely useless. That is all except one, and it's the weapon we're looking at today, as it's time to find out, can you beat Fallout 3 with only the toy knife? For those that are unaware, the toy knife is a variant of the bog standard kitchen knife found in Fallout 3, only it is worse in just about every way imaginable. It is not only the worst weapon in the entire game in terms of damage, but it also has the lowest durability of any weapon to boot. And considering it is a unique item and Fallout 3 isn't nice enough to have the jury rigging perk, this means that this piece of plastic can only be repaired by merchants and not the player. Truly, it is a weapon so awful that I may as well be doing a pacifist playthrough of the game. Now, with all that out of the way, let's begin. Much like with Fallout 4 runs, I'm just using the save at the exit to the vault to save on time, as there isn't anything that really changes in Vault 101 upon repeated playthroughs. For those curious, it's a save from the Mechanist run, so other than the rad roach at the 10th birthday party, nothing inside the vault has been harmed. As my weapon of choice this playthrough is going to be about as effective as a blunt toothpick, I will need to assign my special stats and skills effectively to get the most out of its low damage and durability. After careful consideration, I decided on 9 strength, 6 endurance, 3 intelligence, and 10 in agility and luck. Strength could be at 10, but I'll be heading to Megaton immediately to grab the strength bobblehead, so maxing it out now would be a waste. Agility is at 10 because melee weapons do more damage in VAT, so I'll be wanting to use it to attack as much as possible. The 10 points in luck then complements this nicely, as well as having a higher chance to crit. The rest of the points I just put into endurance and intelligence, as they were the only other useful stats. A higher endurance stat would be nice, so I'll probably put points into it with the intense training perk down the line. For my tag skills, I choose melee weapons for more damage, speech as it's more effective than bartering in Fallout 3 to convince people to give you more money, and then finally explosives so I can disarm the bomb in Megaton for some easy caps and a free level up. Leaving the vault, I of course level up and put a single point into explosives for the aforementioned reason, and then dump the rest into speech. As I was deciding what perk to take, it dawned on me that I probably should have played as a female character so I could have access to the perk allowing me to do more damage against male enemies, as in the main story you tend to fight more men than women. Hell, every single one of the Enclave soldiers are men. Oh well, I'm not loading back now, so I took Lady Killer anyway and then persuaded Silver to hand over all of her money. Seeing how I haven't mentioned it yet, I may as well bring it up now. The reason I need a lot of caps this run, aside from having to pay for repairs, is that I will need to buy boat tickets to and from Point Lookout if I want to get the toy knife, as that's where it's located. The tickets cost just a bit over 300 caps, so I make use of my speech skill once more and get the 500 cap reward for defusing the bomb. I then grab the strength bobblehead, and as there is no time like the present, begin my long walk to the ferry to Point Lookout. Rather than ducking in and out of various locations, I just head directly southeast and pray I don't become some irradiated monster's dinner. Seems I was right to be cautious, as I was pursued by the worst monster of all, man, as well as fire-breathing ants and a small child. I also get chased by some ghouls, but some basic parkour across these buildings was enough to make them lose interest. I also dodge the ants, and more importantly, Brian in Grey Ditch, and then swim from Willem's Wharf to the ferry to avoid any trouble with the troll raiders near the Citadel. It seems I underestimate how stingy Tobar the ferryman can be, as he ends up charging me 453 caps for a single one-way ticket. While I of course have to pay for this ticket now, that price is far too steep for me to pay to go back and forward, so I came to the decision that I would at the very least play through Point Lookout to the part where the boat rides become free. Finding the toy can be difficult if you don't know where to look, so for once in my life I made sure to research the location of the weapon prior to starting the run. It's directly north of where you get off the boat, near the top of the map to be exact. Thankfully, Point Lookout isn't very large, so it doesn't take long to travel across the entire map. It's in the middle of the swamp, so I have hillbillies and glowing ogres to contend with, which isn't ideal. Once I spot this yellow sign, however, I know I'm close and can run around these bushes to find the toy knife, along with a hockey mask, to serve as a Friday the 13th reference I suppose. At the moment, it does only 5 damage, even with all my points in melee weapons. Regardless, I don't let that dissuade me and proceed to test it out in the nearby ghoul. To the shock of no one, it barely scratches him. With no other options, I retreat far enough into the swamp that they stop following me. Here is where things get a little interesting. The weapon, as of right now, is in very poor condition, so of course I want to get it fixed. The problem is that Fallout 3 doesn't really have a lot of NPCs that can fully repair your equipment for you. The only one who comes to mind right now is Soma from the Mothership Zeta DLC, but first off, she isn't permanent, and secondly, I am not even going to attempt to stop an alien invasion with a children's toy. At least not today. Lucky for me, this is a Bethesda game we're playing here, so if there's something you need, there's a high likelihood you can glitch it in some shape or form, and repairs aren't any different. Not too far from where I got the knife, I can find a man named Haley. From the outset, he isn't all that special, just your run-of-the-mill trader who also has a low repair skill who can slightly fix up your items. As you can see, he only has 16 in repair, nothing too impressive. Well, if I leave his house and then interact with the nearby Nuka-Cola machine and then re-enter the building and speak to him, we can see his repair skill has now increased by 5. This can happen indefinitely so long as I keep leaving, activating the machine, and re-entering. So after a few minutes I can increase his repair skill to 100 and now have a semi-efficient way to keep the toy knife in a usable condition. Completely repairing it from a broken state only costs 40 caps, so it also won't break the bank, which is nice. As mentioned earlier though, coming back and forth on the ferry is not going to be viable with those prices every time I need my knife superglued back together, so it was time to begrudgingly head for the mansion and start the main quest of Point Lookout. Arriving at the mansion, and it's just a game of tower defense as we need to defend against waves of tribals. Despite my best efforts to help and get some experience, Desmond along with his dogs take out any and all tribals before I get to kill them, rendering most of my efforts pointless. That said, when I get separated from Desmond in the West Wing, I get into a scuffle with some tribals, and it goes about as well as you might imagine. I would say it's like death by 1,000 cuts, but that would of course imply I'm actually killing them, which is of course a lie. If I can say one good thing about the toy knife, it's that it has the lowest AP cost of any weapon, so at the very least, I can attack with it a good number of times in VATS. This, along with the whole extra melee damage in VATS thing, pretty much guarantees the majority of combat will look like this. Realizing that the only things getting damaged are me and my weapon, I opt to just run on ahead and ignore the tribals and seal up the rooms where they're coming from. This is where things get controversial, as I have to use a ranged weapon to blow up the tank to seal off the room. From previous weapon restricted runs in the past, it has become apparent that so long as I don't attack anything with another weapon, then the run is still valid. Much like other Fallout 3 videos where I have to use the BB gun to kill the rat roach anyway. If this bothers you, feel free to say I failed the run. Anyway, once I've sealed the rooms, it's time to defend the main hall, which goes fairly well with Desmond by my side, until he exudes too much of his power and the game crashes. As this is Fallout we're talking about, I was expecting this, so I've been saving every few minutes or so and don't lose a lot of progress. Once again, I throw myself at the tribals, but don't really get anywhere as Desmond mops them up with little difficulty. I can, however, get experience from finishing the quest, which is certainly welcome. Better yet, this quest grants you the Superior Defender perk, which makes it so you deal more damage and take less while standing still. Keep that in mind going forward, as there might be a lot of footage of me standing completely still just swinging a knife. I also level up from completing the quest, and from this point I'm going to focus on maxing my melee weapons to squeeze as much damage out of the knife as possible. Before pushing ahead with the quest line, I returned to Haley and fixed up my weapons and armor. I also made sure to loot everything from the tribals so that I would definitely have enough caps. With my skills increased and the weapon fully repaired, I now do 11 damage with each swing, so it's not awful. In fact, I managed to actually take down some vicious dogs while I was on my way to join the cult. I know that really isn't saying much, but it's certainly an improvement over before. My next mission is to get as high as a kite while retrieving the seeds of the Mega Punga fruit. The whole place is overrun with mirelurks, probably comes as no surprise, but I choose not to engage them and get lobotomized in record time. After waking up from my fever dream, I confront Nadine to learn the location of the tribe's leader, as well as to make her go and become the new captain of the boat, so I don't have to worry about throwing away all of my money. On the way to the tribe's leader, I get jumped by some feral and swamp ghouls and decide to stand my ground. I am well aware that this is most likely in part to coming to the DLC early, and therefore there being weaker enemies, but I'm able to cut through the approaching ghouls with ease. Either the weapon isn't as bad as I initially thought, or my build is managing to make it just a little bit more competent. Like most weapons, its critical damage isn't too bad either. I figure this out as I'm able to sneak attack one-shot the leader of the tribals. With that out of the way, it's time to strap Desmond's device to the Ferris wheel and what else but fight more tribals. My maxed out agility and luck really begin to shine from here on out as I finally start getting a decent amount of crits and VATs. The tribals with hunting rifles were fairly simple to deal with. So long as I could close the gap between us, there wasn't a lot they could do about the barrage of pokes coming their way. While the gun-toting tribals were easy enough to deal with, there was one with a knife that for some reason was just inflicting so much more damage on me than any of the others, and was even able to kill me. Not one to let things like that slide, I load back and lure her into an open area by herself, and proceed to engage in the fight again, and thanks to the wonders of the block button, can carefully whittle her down and have my revengeance. After she's out of the way, I repair my weapons once more, and return to Desmond as the mansion explodes. Down in his panic room, I get the final quest, but more importantly, I find this suit of combat armor that's a pretty substantial find at my current level. Not to abruptly cut the DLC short or anything, but this is the end of my adventures in Point Lookout. Simply put, I cannot finish the final quest as regardless of who you side with, you have to kill Professor Calvert, and as it turns out, he's immune to the toy knife, or any melee weapons as far as I'm aware. That kinda sucks, but on the bright side, I can take out my frustrations on Tobar, now that he has been outed as the tribal's kleptomaniac brain surgeon. With my swampy side adventures behind me, it was time to return to the capital wasteland and see about starting the main quest. While I could fast travel back to Vault 101 and head west to Smith Casey's garage, I figured that since it's a short swim away that I should try and clear the mutants out of the Jefferson Memorial, as it's the only mandatory combat encounter in the entire game other than the rad roach inside the vault at the beginning. Plus, I wanted to hit them now as at my current level they will most likely just be normal Serp mutants with a few brutes. But if I come back after meeting up with Dad, there's a high likelihood that some of them will have been upgraded to Masters. On a somewhat positive note, normal Serp mutants don't have as much health as the tribals from Point Lookout, and I'm actually able to take the first two that are outside the memorial down without any trouble. I double check to make sure the difficulty is at normal, which it is, and then continue on inside. I let the turrets inside do some of the work for me as I wait around until the mutants destroy it so that I can save some durability on the toy. Just like the two outside, the mutants in here continue to go down surprisingly easy. So I make my way for the control room where things are bound to get a little more interesting as I face off against my first brute. He obviously has more health and better weapons than the others as he's using an assault rifle, but it seems like if you just plant yourself right in front of them and hack away, they miss most of their shots. To be fair, I would also probably be a pretty bad shot if a man in a Confederate hat kept hitting me with a squeaky toy while I was trying to focus. As usual, VATS continues to come in clutch in this run as I keep landing crits while using it. The basement was probably where things got the most tense as there was a lot of them down here that wanted nothing more than to riddle me with bullets. Once more, invading the brute's personal space makes him so unsettled that with enough patience I can take him down. That said, when I take him down, I level up, nearly max out my melee weapons, but even better, I take the Bloody Mess perk as it's one of the only perks that will actually improve my damage output in this entire run. I'd be lying if I said that was the main reason I wanted it though. Let's be real, we all just want to see people explode when hit with a children's toy. With the mutants all cleared out from the interior, I ventured back outside to clear out the last few, but as expected, the knife completely broke before I could accomplish my goal. With no way to defend myself, I ran for Rivet City, all the while my combat armor proved to be one of the best pieces of equipment I could have obtained this run. I have absolutely zero business in Rivet City until I've rescued Dad, but I thought I may as well mark it on the map now rather than later. After I arrive, it's back to Haley to get me in fighting shape once more. I then stop in Megaton for a few healing supplies thanks to the caps I've been hoarding up until now, and then head off west to find Dad. Mole rats and protectrons litter the way to Smith Casey's garage, but they are easy enough to deal with, given that I've been fighting super mutants up until this point. Being a little overzealous, I ran into Evergreen Mills head on and began to take the fight to the raiders. The raiders here, while numerous, are fairly weak and low leveled, so there isn't a lot they can really do. That is, except release the behemoth, who for some reason was on good terms with them and only seemed interested in killing me. Lucky for me though, he seems to have a phobia of cars, as he would run away anytime I stood near them. For what it's worth, after I dealt with the raiders, I did indeed attempt to fight the behemoth. I have a lot of damage resistance, especially for this early in the game, so I can take just about anything he can throw at me. I am also able to just outright block his attacks, which I think says a lot about how strong my guy is. Truth is though, even after taking any and all performance enhancing drugs in my person, the behemoth is just far too tanky for me to take down before the knife breaks. It's a little disappointing, although I figured that this would be the case. On my way out, he was still chasing me, so I lured him into the nearby mines, but they also barely fazed him. With the raiders dead and no one to stop the rampaging behemoth, I pressed on towards Smith Casey's, and rather than waste any time, just know I activated the failsafe because communism. After saving Dad, I managed to level up and max out my melee weapons, and then take the toughness perk because a good defense will probably be required from this point on. Just like with Rivet City earlier, I decided to locate Lamplight now to save on having to do it later, as it's a short jog away from the garage. Just as I was heading there, I came across some outcasts fighting a Mr. Gutsy. Naturally, I jumped in to help, and actually managed to land the killing blow. The true blessing here was that the Mr. Gutsy fired off a few shots into a nearby truck, causing it to then explode, taking out one of the outcast members and gravely injuring the second. He was so badly damaged that a single crit was able to take him out. I then repaired the two sets of power armor with each other, and after I made it safely to Lamplight, went back to Haley and had just enough money to fix up the power armor to max. Sure, I can't wear it yet, but when I can, it is going to be a massive help. Next is Project Purity, and thanks to my disagreements with the mutants earlier, I can move straight onto the back and forth fetch quest part before seeing how I fare against the United States government. I have mentioned in the past that the Enclave and the base game story of Fallout 3 are incredibly weak, more than likely so that the player doesn't get obliterated should they only do the main story up until this point. Well, this is no more apparent here, as just like the mutants and raiders before them, I am able to slowly chop my way through them all without suffering much damage. At the very least, I do get to have one last talk with Dad after fighting my way through them.
I know there's a lot going on right now. This is all very sudden. I just wanted to say that I'm proud of you. You're a good person, and it shows.
All of the Enclave and the tunnels are out of stabbing range, so I just leave them be. As for the ghouls, Well, they're brittle enough that I can cut their limbs off, so you tell me. Arriving at the Citadel, I go through the necessary hoops to progress the story, but more importantly, I get power armor training and can now put the Outcast set to good use. Returning to Lamplight and I fail the speech check to get in the easy way. Sure, I could save scum until I get in, but where's the fun in that? What this means is it's off to Paradise Falls to see a man about a slave. Clearly, I just cannot escape Lincoln, as once again I channel his power as I bring a righteous fury down upon every slaver in my way. The power armor proves to be a great addition to my arsenal as bullets and melee weapons just seem to bounce right off of me and don't even come close to putting me down, while I slowly beat every one of them into submission. Clover, with her Chinese officer sword, believe it or not, was probably the strongest of them all, although this may have been down to the fact that she's a potential companion, so she may have a lot more defense and health than the others. All that leaves is Eulogy Jones, and while he wins the prize for being the most fashionable of the slavers, that snazzy red coat won't save him from a blunt stabbing. Other than abolishing slavery for like the 4th time now, coming here was a good idea, as I was able to procure a substantial amount of valuable loot, and after freeing the children, I returned to Haley for what else but some much needed repairs and caps. Saving the kids of course grants me passage in the Limelight, and from there, Murder Pass, because I'm not smart enough to skip it with a science check. It's not a huge deal as I just ignore all of the mutants on the way to the entrance of the vault, as I don't feel like backtracking out of Vault 87 should the knife break further in. I fight many of the mutants when I get inside, even a few masters that certainly waste far more of the knife's condition than I probably would have liked. At a certain point, not quite sure when, it occurred to me that I'd be heading to Raven Rock straight after grabbing the Gek, so I wouldn't have another chance to fix my weapon until just before the final mission. As soon as I realised this, I just ignored the rest of the mutants, even per Fox, and ran straight for the Gek. Thankfully, there's a random part of the doorway where there's zero radiation, so I can grab it myself with ease. Also, interesting little tidbit of random knowledge, when the grenade is dropped down by, I guess, Spider-Man, there's a button prompt to activate it. It doesn't do anything as far as I'm aware, but I found it interesting all the same. Waking up in the White House, I level up and take the Finesse perk, further increasing my chance of landing crits to help speed things along. Not that I get a lot of use out of it here, because as mentioned, the knife's condition is dangerously low, so yet again, I have to avoid most of the enemies. This is what I meant at the start of the video by it being close to a pacifist run, as in longer than average encounters, I may as well just not use the weapon and run instead. Making it to the present is simple enough, and for once I don't ask him to nicely off himself and begin to make my leave as the sentry bots clear out the last of the Enclave for me. I thought that I would have enough durability left to take out a single person, so I tested that theory on the final soldier with a missile launcher. Well, I could not have been more wrong, because as it turns out, I was only able to deliver one more strike with the knife before it once again shattered in my hands. Angry at the lack of killing on my end, I returned to Haley one final time, and then it was time to take back the Purifier. Wanting to get my hands dirty, and because Liberty Prime refused to do his job, I swam my way to the end of the Enclave blockade and took the fight to them. Just like before, their power armor is clearly made out of paper mache, as they just can't stand up to the power of plastic. While fun and entertaining to watch heavily armoured soldiers cower in fear before me, I nearly shot myself in the foot with this plan, as when Prime finally started working, sort of, I could proceed to the fight with Autumn and his guards. I was able to take out the Colonel easy enough along with one of the Enclave soldiers, but then yet again, the knife broke on the last man. You may be wondering, well, what's the big deal? Surely Sarah Lyons can just finish him off. And you are right, but because this is Fallout 3, she started glitching out and wouldn't fight back, all the while her gun floated around next to her. This happened a few times, but eventually I managed to get an attempt where she loses her ability of telekinesis and helps me with the fight. I am a little disappointed that she got the final hit on Autumn, but on the plus side, I leveled up, and if there was ever a time to get the rad resistance perk, then this was it. Now with the power to deny radiation consent to enter my body, I could stand and laugh at the quote-unquote lethal levels of radiation inside the chamber. I set my knife down so it would be the last thing I would see, which didn't exactly work, entered the code, finishing the game and proving yes, you can indeed beat Fallout 3 with only the toy knife. I'm usually all for melee weapons in my Fallouts, but that was rough. If it wasn't for that exploit with Haley, I don't know if I would have been able to even use the knife that much given its horrible condition. Hope you all enjoyed. Now I'm going to go and play Elden Ring. I'll see you all next week. Regardless, that's going to be the end of this challenge video. If you enjoyed what you saw, consider giving the video a like, and you're interested in more challenges in the future, feel free to subscribe to one of these videos every week. My name's Nerbit, stay safe everyone, I'll see you all in the next video.